September 1, 1943. Rabaul Airfield, New Britain. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai hesitated with his hand above the intelligence file, his functioning eye the other taken by American gunfire a year prior moving across lines that caused him to laugh openly in the sticky heat of the operations tent. The Americans have introduced a new interceptor, as heavy as a bomber, as broad as a transport plane. Its name is Hellcat. Our intelligence reports indicate it is twice the weight of our Zero. This is another example of American engineering failure. Looking beyond the tent's openings, he saw his squadron's A6M Zeros positioned on the panels of pierced steel. Streamlined, agile, lethal. For the past 2 years, these planes had ruled the skies above the Pacific. British Hurricanes, American P-40s, Dutch Brewster Buffaloes, each had been shot down by the Zero's weapons. The Americans' newest effort, this swollen Hellcat, would experience the same fate. Unbeknownst to Sakai and to the rest of the Japanese naval airmen congregating for the morning briefing, in precisely 30 days, this flaw would start the calculated destruction of Japanese naval aviation. The F6F Hellcat would reach a kill ratio of 19-1, eliminating 5,223 enemy planes with only 270 lost in air-to-air battles. This aircraft would revolutionize carrier combat, shatter the Japanese air fleet, and expose that the Zero's streak of domination rested on grave misjudgments. The equations of air superiority were on the brink of change, led by a fighter that appeared awkward, felt ponderous in flight, and seemed to go against all the doctrines the Japanese had honed. Nevertheless, within half a year, the very same flyers now deriding these intelligence notes would find themselves writing farewell letters, fully aware that meeting Hellcats meant a statistical near certainty of being killed. The height of the rising sun. The self-assurance of the Japanese Navy in September 1943 was not mere pride. It was based on numbers. Since December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service posted winning statistics that strained credulity. At Pearl Harbor, they had 29 planes downed while destroying 347. In the Philippines, they lost 7 with 103 shot down in return. Over Darwin, their 2 aircraft were lost against 30 destroyed. The British Far East Fleet's air contingent was wiped out. The Dutch East Indies Air Force was obliterated within mere days. At the heart of this air supremacy flew the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, a machine that had altered the standards of fighter engineering. When captured units were examined by American specialists in 1942, initial disbelief met the performance data. A fighter capable of bomber-like range, biplane-like agility, and able to shoot down every opponent it cornered. Seemingly impossible. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishiwa, destined to be Japan's top ace with 87 recorded kills, gave his account of the Zero in his recovered journal. Piloting the Zero is akin to having wings as your own. The plane reacts to the pilot's intentions, not simply hand controls. American aircraft are akin to trucks, strong yet ungainly. Their fighter production mirrors their automobile industry. Heavy, excessively complicated, inefficient. The Zero reached its almost miraculous capabilities thanks to a groundbreaking approach to design. The use of extra super duralumin, a secret aluminum alloy, allowed for a build 30% lighter than US equivalents. No armor plating shielded its pilot. There were no self-sealing tanks to add extra pounds. Radios were frequently omitted just to trim 30 more units of weight. Every gram was forfeited for speed and maneuverability. The disregard for intelligence. Initial descriptions of the F6F Hellcat came to Japanese analysts from impartial Swedish channels at the start of 1943. The reported features appeared as probable propaganda, or possibly as intentional distortion. The fighter's loaded mass was 12,186 lb. The Zero's was 5,800. Its sheathing wings measured 334 square feet, equipped with a bulky radial engine. With 2,400 rounds on board, reinforced armor throughout, bullet-resistant glass, and self-sealing tanks storing 250 gallons of fuel, it was a tank in the sky. Captain Minoru Jinder, noted for masterminding Pearl Harbor, studied these numbers at the Combined Fleet headquarters. His review, kept within Japan's defense records, was dismissive. The Americans have learned nothing new. The Hellcat continues their flawed tradition, trying to substitute hardware for pilot expertise. A Zero could outmaneuver it with ease. Figures seem to reinforce his view. A wing loading of 22 pounds per square foot gave the Zero a 612 feet turning circle. The Hellcat, with its 36.5 lb per square foot, would have a turning circle above 900 feet. In a turning engagement, the core of all Japanese air tactics, the Hellcat would stand no chance. The initial sighting occurred on September 30, 1943 at Marcus Island. Petty Officer First Class Yoshio Fukui was providing escort for a reconnaissance flight when he noticed them. 6 dark blue aircraft rising from the southeast came into view. His after-action report recorded his first thought. B-25 bombers heading in an odd direction. When they shifted course, he noticed the unique outline. A single engine, a huge fuselage, and wings that appeared too stubby for the airframe. He documented it as his first encounter with an F6F type fighter. His initial impression was that the Americans had installed fighter armament on a torpedo aircraft and were fighting using conventional approaches. Conventional approaches involved using the Zero's superior turning ability to maneuver behind opponents. Fukui banked into a descending turn, anticipating that the hefty American plane would fly straight, giving him a chance to swing onto its 6 o'clock. What followed defied precedent. The Hellcat stayed and did not attempt to escape or match his turn. Instead, it climbed nearly straight up. Its Pratt & Whitney R28000 double wasp engine, delivering 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's Nakajima Sakai's 1,130 horsepower, powered the Hellcat upward at a rate of 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui tried to pursue, but saw his airspeed drop as the Zero fought gravity. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat executed a maneuver unthinkable for an aircraft of its size. A hammerhead that placed it immediately behind Fukui. The American pilot fired from 400 meters, according to Fukui's account. 6 machine guns, contrary to the expected 4. The firepower was unmatched. My Zero was struck 17 times in a 3-second burst. I only got away by spinning out of the line of fire. Fukui lived through the battle, barely making it back to Marcus Island in a Zero riddled with holes. His wingman, Petty Officer Second Class Masao, did not make it home. Nor did the reconnaissance aircraft under their protection. The Hellcat claimed its first victory, highlighting the paradox of its weight. On October 5, 1943, Task Force 14 attacked Wake Island. Lieutenant Yoshio led 12 Zeros from the 252nd Air Group to confront what seemed to be yet another minor American raid. U.S. carriers had harassed the area with these hit-and-run strikes for several months, typically retreating before Japanese pilots could engage fully. This occasion proved otherwise. We ascended to 20,000 feet, Shiga wrote in his journal. Beneath us were 12 F6F fighters organized into 3 groups. We supposedly held every strategic edge, altitude, position, and the element of surprise. Success seemed assured. The battle that ensued completely overturned the Japanese mindset on tactics. As the Zeros dove toward the Hellcats, the American aircraft held their formation and initiated a shallow dive to assess their speed advantage. When the Zeros began firing at the edge of their range, hoping for lucky shots, the Hellcats absorbed the hits. The Hellcat featured 212 pounds of armor plating to safeguard the pilot, 110 pounds around the oil system, and fuel tanks that could self-seal despite repeated hits. After the Zeros had used up their ammunition in diving attacks, the Hellcats mounted their reply. Rather than engaging in a turning fight, they exploited their mass as an asset. Powering up to full throttle, they climbed into an altitude band where the Zero's engine faltered for lack of air. Up at 25,000 feet, the Hellcat still produced 1,650 horsepower, while the Zero's engine output fell to 900. They descended on us like hawks pursuing sparrows, Shiga stated. Their heavier build gave them a speed advantage we couldn't hope to match. Their runs consisted of diving and unleashing 6 fearsome guns, then climbing away before we could act. 8 Zeros were downed. Not a single Hellcat was lost. The so-called Marianas Turkey Shoot was foreshadowed. On November 11, 1943 at Rabaul, pilots of the 204th Air Group assembled to listen to a briefing on American tactics by Lieutenant Commander Dao Tanimizu. Tanimizu, holding 32 victories, was among the rare pilots who had survived more than one confrontation with Hellcats. "Forget your prior knowledge about air warfare," he stated. "The Americans have rewritten the rules. They choose not to fight on our terms. They act like executioners, not traditional fighters." Tanimizu clarified what Japanese aviators were gradually and lethally realizing. The Hellcat was not intended to outmaneuver the Zero in turns. Its design meant it would not have to. Employing a strategy called energy fighting, Hellcat crews preserved speed and altitude, switching that energy into sudden attacks that left Zero pilots without a chance to utilize their maneuverability. "They operate as pairs," Tanimizu added, "one higher, one lower. If you engage one, the other is already setting up a dive on your position." Their radios, which we had ridiculed as mere extra load, enabled flawless teamwork. "We conduct ourselves like lone samurai. They move as part of a machine." The technology gap as of December 1943, Tr. Lagoon. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who previously led the attack on Pearl Harbor, was now serving as the Air Operations Officer for the combined fleet. His examination of damaged Zeros that survived fights with Hellcats brought the expanding technology divide to his attention. The difference in weaponry was a matter of arithmetic. Each of the Hellcat's 6 Browning M2 machine guns could fire 750 rounds every minute, for a combined total of 4,500 rounds per minute. Every .50 caliber bullet had a weight of 46 grams and a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second, which delivered 3,500 foot-pounds of force. In comparison, the Zero's 27.7 mm machine guns launched projectiles weighing 11 grams at 2,300 feet per second, producing 750 foot-pounds of energy. Even more alarming were reports of Americans directing their fighters with radar. While Japanese airmen were still dependent on their eyes to find adversaries, Hellcat crews were guided to targets by ship-based radar operators who could detect Japanese planes from a range of 50 miles. Lieutenant Sardamu Kumachi recounted his initial encounter with radar-directed interception. "We were ascending through clouds when we were attacked. No prior alert, no visual cues. Hellcats swooped down on us from above, directly in line with our path, in perfect formation. They had knowledge of our location, our altitude, and our heading. We were like the blind facing those who could see in the darkness." The pilot calculation. January 1944. The crisis for Japanese pilots was escalating into a disaster. The pre-war pilot training program of the Imperial Navy had set the global standard for difficulty. The course lasted 3 years and pilots entered battle with 700 hours of flight experience. Army pilots logged at least 500 hours. These pilots were virtuosos of dogfighting, trained not only in aerobatics and marksmanship but also in the philosophical discipline of air warfare. By the beginning of 1944, naval pilots from Japan were arriving at the front with only 300 flight hours, while their Army counterparts had just 200. Due to a lack of fuel, the majority of instruction took place in gliders. Each pilot's gunnery drills were restricted to 50 bullets. Essential training in flying in formation, using instruments, and radio communication was removed to speed pilots to combat. In contrast, American pilots came with at least 300 hours logged, including 50 specifically in their assigned aircraft. They had each practiced with thousands of rounds of ammunition, drilled carrier landings until they could perform them by instinct, and studied energy tactics in the relative safety of Texas airfields. Lieutenant Commander Yoshihiro Hashimoto, stationed at Kasumagara Naval Air Station as a training officer, stated in his final submission, "We are sending boys to battle seasoned professionals." Just yesterday, Ensign Yamamoto arrived at the battlefront. He had never discharged his weapons in the air. No ammunition was provided for training. He had never flown at night. There was no fuel for such exercises. His first dogfight lasted 7 minutes. The Formosa Epiphany, October 12 to 16, 1944. During the Battle of Formosa, Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, head of the 2nd Air Fleet, threw every available resource into halting the American carrier attacks on Formosa. More than 700 planes, including the last adequately trained aviators from homeland training units, participated. Japanese reports asserted overwhelming success. According to claims, 26 carriers and battleships were sunk, along with 300 American aircraft destroyed. Upon the pilot's return and the development of gun camera footage, the truth came out as disastrous. Actual American losses tallied 89 aircraft. Japanese losses amounted to 329 aircraft and nearly all the skilled flyers. Lieutenant Sadaki Akamatsu, among the minority who survived, recounted the massacre in his written memoirs. Hellcats occupied every layer of the sky. As we rose, they were higher still. As we descended, they lay in wait beneath. The sky had been divided into sectors, with a division covering each grid. This was not ordinary aerial combat. It was orchestrated annihilation. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, June 19, 1944, Philippine Sea. The Japanese fleet deployed its rebuilt carrier group in Operation Ago, aimed at a decisive battle to eliminate American carriers in the Pacific. The operation included 9 carriers, 450 planes, and their finest pilots left. Facing them was Task Force 58 with 15 carriers and 956 aircraft, of which 450 were F6F Hellcats. Admiral Saburo Ozawa sent out his attack forces in 4 groups, trusting that Japanese experience and the Zero's operational range would bring victory. The opening wave of 69 planes departed at 8:30. American radar picked them up at 150 miles out. Hellcat pilots were directed to intercept, perfectly aligned for confrontation. They possessed the height advantage, had the sun behind them, and approached from sectors the Japanese could not observe. Lieutenant Zenji Hirai, directing the fighter cover, identified the Hellcats shortly before battle began. They were arranged in layers between 20,000 and 30,000 feet, with at least 60 aircraft forming a formidable barrier. We were only at 18,000 feet. Every key tactical edge was on their side. The fight lasted for 12 minutes. Out of 69 Japanese aircraft, 42 were lost. Commander David McCampbell, leading Air Group 15, downed 7 enemy planes that day. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, achieved 6 victories. The Zeros attempted to outmaneuver us, McCampbell stated. We simply declined. We performed diving attacks, shot them down, and zoomed up again. When they tried to follow, they stalled, and another Hellcat would shoot them down. By the close of the engagement, Japan had lost 346 carrier-based aircraft and an additional 50 land-based planes. American casualties were 30 aircraft from various reasons. That night, the American pilots coined the phrase, "turkey shoot," in their ready rooms, as the enemy seemed as defenseless as domestic turkeys. The Leyte Gulf Record, October 24, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf. Commander David McCampbell set a personal single-mission record during this engagement. Taking off with 7 Hellcats from the Essex, he confronted a group of 60 Japanese planes headed for the American ships. Throughout a 90-minute engagement, McCampbell shot down 9, consisting of 5 Zeros and 4 bombers, while Lieutenant Roy Rushing took down another 6. McCampbell later noted, "I expended all my ammunition after my 9th kill. The Hellcat did not fail me the entire time. Despite being outnumbered 8-1, my aircraft returned without a scratch." This event signified the total reversal of aerial dominance. Just 7 Hellcats routed 60 Japanese planes, shooting down 15 for no losses of their own. McCampbell's exceptional accomplishments on June 19 with 7 victories and on October 24 with 9 made him a recipient of both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. The psychological break. The battles of the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf resulted in what Japanese military psychologists would later call Hellcat psychosis among the pilots who survived. In his report following the action, Admiral Ozawa wrote, "The way the enemy used radar to direct their fighters accomplished something we never thought possible: the mass production of aerial combat. Each Hellcat ceased to be just a single fighter and instead became a part of an enormous apparatus. Our aviators, regardless of how adept, found themselves battling not other aircraft, but a coordinated system." The shortage of flight personnel grew so severe that in early 1945, Navy pilot training shrank to between 40 and 50 hours, while Army pilots received 60 to 70 hours. Kamikaze aviators underwent merely 40 to 50 hours total, equal to around 7 days of instruction. The Okinawa Armageddon, April through June 1945 Operation Iceberg. The Japanese mounted 1,900 kamikaze attacks on the U.S. fleet stationed near Okinawa. The Hellcat emerged as not just a combat plane, but as a shield against the desperation of suicide strikes. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, heading his Flying Circus division of Hellcats, downed 23 Japanese planes during the engagement. His new tactics, deploying squads of 4 in synchronized strikes, rendered older Japanese strategies fatal. "We came up with what we called the mowing machine," Valencia recalled. 4 Hellcats flying side by side, spaced 100 yards apart, would slice through Japanese squadrons at top speed. Every pilot protected his assigned sector. We'd pass once, ascend again, and repeat the pattern. The numbers from the Okinawa battle were harsh. Hellcats conducted 38,038 combat missions, with claims of 2,351 enemy planes destroyed while losing 249, which amounted to a 9.51 result. Beyond that, they managed to keep about 80% of kamikaze planes from striking their objectives. The technological divide. By 1945, the gulf in technology could no longer be bridged. The F6F Hellcat boasted enhancements that made it even more lethal. Features included water injection for 2,200 horsepower, zero-length rocket launchers, superior armor, and the K-14 sighting computer able to calculate lead automatically. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, the famed Japanese ace with 28 credited victories, although modern researchers put the number closer to 15, first encountered Hellcats in June 1944. Though a veteran, he barely survived his initial clash. "I gave my best performance," he recounted in his memoir. "Loops, rolls, split-S maneuvers, everything I'd mastered over 200 dogfights. The Hellcat stayed on my tail with ease, almost nonchalantly. I escaped with my life only because the American aviator forgot to jettison his drop tank before engaging me." The cost in lives. By the conclusion of the conflict, the F6F Hellcat accounted for the destruction of 5,223 adversary aircraft in aerial combat, losses of just 270 to enemy fighters, an overall kill ratio of 19.3 to 1, produced 305 American Navy aces, and was responsible for 75% of the Navy's total air-to-air kills. The Japanese side paid a terrible price. Out of 18,000 naval aviators at the start of the war, by August 1945 less than 100 with significant combat experience remained. The kamikaze equation. Turning Japanese naval aviation from a select force to kamikaze tactics was the ultimate confirmation of the Hellcat's dominance. Because they couldn't compete directly any longer, Japan made its pilots into guided bombs. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, the kamikaze program's architect, defended it with cold calculation. If a Zero attacks a carrier conventionally, the odds are virtually nil. Hellcats will shoot it down. But turning the Zero into a missile, the odds of a hit rise to 30%. Either way, the pilot dies. At least as a kamikaze, his sacrifice counts. On October 25, 1944, Hiroyoshi Nishizawa escorted the first sanctioned kamikaze sortie by Lieutenant Yukio Seki, and claimed his 86th and 87th kills, taking down 2 F6F Hellcats. The day after, October 26, 1944, Nishizawa perished as a passenger in a transport shot down by Hellcats of Bf-14. Japan's top ace, stranded without his own plane, fell to the same fighter he had once defeated. The closing testament, August 15, 1945, the day of Emperor Hirohito's announcement of surrender. At Atsugi Field, Captain Minoru Genda, who had dismissed the Hellcat as a brute lacking subtlety, listened as the Emperor addressed the nation. Around him were the remnants of Imperial Navy aviation. Teenage flyers with just 40 hours in the cockpit, airplanes pieced together from leftovers, empty of fuel. On that same day, Ensign Clarence Moore of Bf-31 aboard USS Belleau brought down a Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber after 2 p.m. the final air-to-air kill of World War II. The Japanese pilot, apparently uninformed of the ceasefire, was headed for the American ships when intercepted by Moore. 2 brief salvos from the Hellcat's 6.50 cals finished the Pacific Aerial War. The revelation at surrender, September 1945, Atsugi Airfield. The very first American planes to set down following the surrender were a dozen F6F Hellcats from USS Yorktown. Japanese airmen, mechanics, and support crews lined up along the strip to examine up close the machine that had hunted them for so long. U.S. pilot Lieutenant Robert Basu, a 19-kill ace, demonstrated the Hellcat's capabilities to the Japanese flyers. His display of relaxed maneuvers, looping, rolling, and climbing, which would have wrecked a Zero, left the observers in awe. "You have to realize," Basu explained by translator, "this isn't even the plane's full potential. With water injection in combat, it's 20% more powerful. The frame is rated to 13 Gs. I've never overstressed it." The engineering post-mortem. After the war, Japanese engineers investigating captured Hellcats identified the true scale of America's industrial might. The Pratt & Whitney R-28000 engine contained 2,840 finely milled pieces, every one interchangeable with any other engine of the same type. The Nakajima Sakai demanded manual fitting. No 2 engines were identical. Professor Jiro Horikoshi, creator of the Zero, examined the Hellcat thoroughly in the post-war period. His judgment was conclusive. "We built an aircraft for 1941. They constructed a system for 1945. As we obsessed over perfecting the sword, they ushered us into the factory age." The miracle of production. Grumman's manufacturing of the Hellcat became a strategic advantage. The plant at Bethpage, New York, ran non-stop around the clock. At peak, a complete Hellcat emerged from the lines every hour. The total reached 12,275 Hellcats over 30 months, something the Japanese found unimaginable. In 1944, Japan assembled 5,100 fighters in total. That same year, American industry produced 35,000. The entire assembly process showed efficiencies the Japanese thought impossible. Workers using color-coded directions for intricate assemblies, 3 shifts per day, quality control maintained in the face of speed. The strategic shift. The Hellcat's victory was more than tactical. It transformed the whole concept of naval power. Previous thinking held that carriers were fragile assets that had to strike first to survive. The Hellcat changed this calculus. Carriers now could absorb any aerial assault and counterattack. Admiral Mark Mitcher, leader of Task Force 58, recognized this shift. "With the Hellcat, we're under no pressure to find them first. Let them approach. The F6F will shoot them down when we see fit." That assurance unleashed bold, forward operations. American carriers hovered off enemy shores for weeks, protected by Hellcat shields that made air attacks futile. The cultural confrontation. Beyond hardware, the Hellcat embodied a philosophy in conflict with Japanese military traditions. The samurai code prized singular achievement, spiritual resolve, a readiness for death. The Hellcat represented systematic efficiency, technological dominance, and the priority of survival. This ideological gap kept Japanese aviators from adapting to Hellcat doctrine, even when they could discern it. Refusing engagement when in a poor position, vital to Hellcat tactics, was literally unthinkable to pilots steeped in Bushido. The verdict of history. In 1962, the U.S. Navy organized a conference on Pacific War aviation. Both American and Japanese participants convened to reflect on the impact of the war. Captain David McCampbell, America's top Navy ace with 34 kills, stated flatly, "The Hellcat won the Pacific Air War, period. It wiped out Japanese flying power and secured our success as a certainty." Commander Saburo Sakai countered, "The Zero outclassed as a fighter plane. Yet the Hellcat was the stronger weapon system. We did not discern the distinction in time. We brought swords into a gun battle and wondered why we lost." The final reckoning. The Hellcat's supremacy is most clearly shown in the statistics that tell the saga. Its overall kill ratio was 19-1, and against the Zero specifically, 13-1. Production tallied 12,275 Hellcats in 30 months. Zeros produced between 1943 and 1945 totaled about 6,000. Over 5,000 U.S. airmen trained on Hellcats. By August 1945, fewer than 100 Japanese pilots remained with any combat readiness. Admiral Saburo Ozawa, wartime Japanese fleet commander at Philippine Sea, offered perhaps the most candid evaluation. "We derided the Hellcat because we missed that it signified more than a weapon. It was the manifestation of an entire civilization's approach to combat. The moment our laughter stopped was the moment our flying forces were finished." The closing thought. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai survived until 2000. When asked about the Hellcat in his last interview, his assessment summed up its overwhelming dominance. "The Zero made Japan a maritime force to be reckoned with. The Hellcat compelled Japan to realize it never truly belonged among the greatest. We fancied ourselves samurai. The Hellcat revealed we were ordinary men wielding obsolete arms in the face of tomorrow. Any Japanese pilot spared at the end did so because the Hellcat pilot let him go. That is the ultimate humiliation. Living solely at the enemy's mercy." The F6F Hellcat entered service carrying twice the weight of a Zero. It had armored protection absent in the Zero. Its power came from an engine Japan was unable to build. Its weapons were unmatched in Japanese arsenals, guided via radars the Japanese could not perceive, flown by airmen whose training exceeded anything their opponents could offer, and manufactured in quantities Japanese industry could not grasp. Early on, Japanese pilots mocked it, not realizing every additional pound signaled not a flaw, but the resilience of a democratic industry able to shield its warriors. When the reality dawned, the laughter became farewell notes, the derision became kamikaze runs, and their certainty collapsed entirely. The Hellcat did not just defeat the Zero. It crushed an entire way of war, showing that in modern combat, the side constructing the superior system triumphs over the side raising superior fighters. The F6F Hellcat, once the object of Japanese scorn, always had the last laugh.